Would you define a whole bunch of words that you use in here? And you use, first of all, you use the word radical before them. What does radical mean to you?
I mean, it means on a spectrum about whatever we're talking about, it means an extreme.
Okay, what's radical egalitarianism?
Well, I think radical egalitarianism was a change. The move to equality was really one of equality of status about legal rights and also equality of opportunity. That gradually became radical egalitarianism, which is an ideal not of equality of opportunity, but of equality of results. And you see that in affirmative action, quotas, multiculturalism, and so forth. And it causes a great deal of stress and polarization in society.
Where'd this start?
Well, I guess the ideal of equality of opportunity always has in it the danger that people will look at it and say, well, everybody hasn't come out equal, so maybe the opportunity really wasn't fair. Although why they should expect everybody to come out equal, I don't know. And then they begin to try to, well, if that must mean the process isn't fair, then we will now mandate equality of results. That's about the best I can do with it. Perhaps it's been suggested that it is kind of a natural outcome of the idealization of democracy. It might be.
Radical liberalism.
Well, that's what I meant. Radical liberalism I take to be composed of two strands, radical individualism and radical egalitarianism.
Where do you find it in the society right now? If you wanted to go someplace and say, there it is.
Which?
Radical liberalism, where would you find it?
Oh, all over the place. In the White House, for one thing. But look at popular culture, you'll see radical individualism. You look at the relationship, look at the affirmative action programs, you'll see it there.
What about if your old stomping grounds, Yale? How long did you teach there, by the way?
Oh, well, I went in '62, left in '81, and had 4 years off when I was Solicitor General.
Would you find radical liberalism there?
Oh, yeah.
How much of it? I mean, if you had several hundred professors, how many of them would be radical libs?
Oh, I don't know. It doesn't take that many. I mentioned, I guess it's Morrison's Law in there. 25% of a faculty being a radical activist is enough to turn the whole department. And you can see it at Yale recently. Remember the Bass, one of the Bass brothers gave Yale $20 million to set up a program in Western culture, and they couldn't get it set up. And some radical professors were saying Western culture is nothing but the export of imperialism and violence. Well, they finally had to give Bass back the $20 million because they could not establish a program in Western culture.
How did you see it when you were there?
Well, at first it changed. I went there in '62, and I was conservative, and everybody else in the faculty was liberal.
Everyone else?
It's about, you know. Later there came a second one. There were about 40 of us in the faculty, and after all, there were 2 of us who were conservative.
Law school.
Law school. And they talked about hiring a third, but they were afraid he might turn out to be a conservative. And somebody said he would tip the balance. So there'd only be 37 liberals and 3 conservatives. So they didn't hire him. But it was reasonable. One could argue with the liberals, and they could argue with you, and you could remain friends. And I think that's changed at many universities since then. They've become polarized, and out of the '60s, we got this politics of moral assault. You're not only wrong, you're evil for thinking what you do. That wasn't true when I first went to Yale. I haven't been back there for a long time. I don't know if it's true now, but many universities it's clearly true that differences of opinion are more than that. They are fights between good and evil.
Who are some of the folks you taught up there that we might know?
Oh my.
Long list?
No. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. Well, I wouldn't say I taught them. They were in the room.
When you go back to the school and think about the professors like 37-3 or whatever, 39-1, why is it that more conservatives don't get in the teaching business?
Well, I think today it's because they remember how terrible it was when they were students. But in general, I think intellectuals are more likely to be liberals than they are likely to be conservatives.
Do you know why?
Well, I think I cite the reasoning that Max Weber gave, the German sociologist, which is that the intellectual is a person, by the way, intellectual is not necessarily somebody who's very good at intellectual work, but he's somebody who makes a living by talking and writing or manipulating symbols. In other words, journalists, professors, Hollywood. And Weber said that the journalist craves meaning in life. And once religion begins to recede, which gave meaning in life, they look for something else. Well, a kind of a utopian left-wing philosophy gives meaning in life. And of course, we have seen from our First Lady talking about the politics of meaning a great deal. It's not clear that she knows exactly what she means, and nobody else knows exactly what she means, but it's a yearning for some kind of meaning.
In the last couple of minutes, what was the spirit of Port Huron?
Oh, Port Huron was the first gathering, 1962, I believe, of delegates from a new organization called the Students for a Democratic Society. And they met at Port Huron, which was an AFL-CIO camp, and hammered out a manifesto, the Port Huron Statement. And it is, you can see in it the seeds of the New Left. More than the seeds, you can see the New Left in it, and the kind of radicalism that later broke loose. It's a utopian document filled with the idea that men are really infinitely perfectible, full of ideas about radical individualism and radical egalitarianism.
You said it was an obscure meeting. How did you find it?
Oh, no, it was obscure, but then it became, when they held it, it was obscure. But then it became the central document of the New Left. And you can find it in many books today by New Leftists, you know, who are still proud of it. It's a stupefyingly dull document and full of adolescent self-confidence and arrogance about their ability to change the world and their superior wisdom about how to change the world and what it should look like.
A couple other things. Another word you see a lot in your book is nihilism, and you say here it was the order of the decade. What is nihilism?
It is, I think, the decision, the idea that there is no objective truth, moral or otherwise. And I saw it in particular in the chapter on abortion, assisted suicide, and euthanasia. The chapter is called Killing for Convenience. And I think that's nihilism, when you decide that convenience suggests that you kill, your convenience says you kill, there's no principle that stops you, apparently. And I think that's nihilism.
More odds than ends. Modern liberals try to frighten Americans by saying that religious conservatives, quote, want to impose their morality on others. That is palpably foolishness, or that's palpable foolishness. All participants in politics want to impose on others as much of their morality as possible, and no group is more insistent than the liberals.
That's true. You know, liberals have passed endless series of statutes requiring others to behave as they think moral, and that's fine. It's just that when they deny that they're doing that and accuse other people of trying to enact their morality, I think that's just foolishness.
You write a chapter in here on the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. You're not very happy with them.
I'm not very happy with courts in general, not just the Supreme Court.
Why not?
The courts, over time, have always responded to the dominant class in society. In the early part of this century and the latter part of the last century, the dominant class was the business class. And the courts were writing conservative and free market principles into the Constitution that are not there. I mean, it was a conservative activist courts. Since World War II, the dominant class in this country has become the intellectual class. The people I was talking about before, university professors, journalists, Hollywood, foundation staffs, so on and so forth. And the Supreme Court, all the courts are responding to that class. In fact, they come out of that class and they respond to it. It's really more important to many judges what the law schools say about them and what the Washington Post and the New York Times say about them than anything else. And they'll begin to move in that direction, which is a leftward direction. And that's the reason I think we have to think of some democratic check on the courts. By the way, when I spoke of the incentives judges face, if you constantly get praise for one kind of action and criticism for another kind of action, you'll keep moving in the direction where the praise comes from, even without realizing it. And there was a famous experiment by a professor who taught his students about conditioning, and they decided to try it on him, unbeknownst to him. And he was a pacer when he lectured. So as he paced towards the wall with the windows, they would all pay rapt attention and hang like things and take notes furiously. And if he paced the other way, they would begin to lose interest and begin to look at newspapers and so forth. And after about 5 minutes, they had him pinned to the wall with the windows. And that's the way the incentives work. And I think the same thing happens in a more complex fashion to judges.
How long were you on the U.S. Appeals Court here?
6 years.
Did you pay attention to the outside culture when you were, I mean, did that affect you, do you think, when you were here?
No. I think I was much more, I had a very firm idea of what a judge's role is and how it differs from that of a legislator. And I was much more like Scalia and Thomas than like the others.
Would you write strong opinions at the U.S. Court of Appeals here, and then would your fellow judges react to you when you were
Sometimes.
critical?
Oh, yeah.
Was that hard to take, or
No.
did anybody ever say anything to you personally that stop writing these strong things?
No, well, sometimes I remember one judge complaining to me about what I'd said about an opinion which she'd joined. Didn't like it much.
You think there'll ever be television in the Supreme Court?
No. No, television in the Supreme Court would begin to change the behavior of the judges and of the advocates. Justice Souter said that, I think they had television in the New Hampshire Supreme Court, as I recall. And he said, you know, he'd begin to press a line of questioning and then realize it was on television, he'd pull back. Well, I don't want that to happen. There should be as free a flow of intellectual discourse as possible without somebody worrying about how it's looking on television.
Do you change when you're in front of a camera like this and when you're normally speaking to people?
Well, I mean, I don't usually sit down and have as extended a talk as this. That's right.
But I mean, if you're out making a speech, you know there's a television camera in the room. Does that change your?
No, in fact, I often forget it to my regret. They even have instructions about how you look outside a girls' school, bundle a 7-year-old girl into your van, and whether you tell her the end of her ordeal, she's going to be killed or not. I mean, it's really incredible stuff. And I think it's not just depraved, but I think it's an incitement to certain kinds of minds.
So what do you do about it?
Well, if you can, I would censor it. When I say if you can, there may be a problem with technology. Somebody said anarchy, or technology is on the side of anarchy. And it may be impossible. You know, this stuff comes from all over the world, and they can run it through 2 or 3 computers so you don't know where it's coming from. So maybe it will be impossible to censor it, but I think you can try.
You have a whole chapter on censorship.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that that was the lead out of your book and the news stories?
No.
Bob Bork calls for censorship?
No, I know.
And what did you say right away when you read it?
When I read what?
When you started reading those stories,
Well, I knew that. No, I knew that would get people.
Why?
Well, because censorship has become a dirty word. And it's interesting because we lived with censorship in this country for most of our national existence, and until quite recent years. When I was a young man practicing law in Chicago, we had movie censorship in Chicago. It wasn't oppressive. Some of the filth we see now is kept out. That's about it. But we don't have to guess about censorship. We've had it in this country. We've lived with it, and we know what it's like. And we're going to have to think about it again.
Did everyone read this chapter before they wrote about it, or they just jumped to the gun on it?
I don't know. I've read some reviews that suggested to me they hadn't read much of the book at all.
Well, how would you do it? I mean, where would you start on censorship?
The same way you start with any law, you know. Your elected representatives would write a code about what is obscene and can be banned. Executive branch official would then apply the code to a particular instance. And if the person it was applied to felt that the code was too broad or bad, or that it had been misapplied, he would go to court and try to get relief. Censorship is no different than other forms of law. should be democratically made and democratically enforced.
What do you think of the V-chip?
The V-chip, I don't think is going to help a lot. For one thing, a lot of parents aren't going to use it. And for another, I think it will give people who want to make really salacious material or violent material an excuse. They'll say, well, we can make it even worse than it is now because people have a V-chip. They can protect themselves.
What do you think of the movie rating system?
As far as I know, it hasn't done any good. Kids say they can get into any movie they want to.
In your opinion, is this country going down, and is there any chance of saving it?
Of course, you know, I can't predict the future. All I can say is, if we continue on the lines we are, things I think will live in a very coarse, violent, divisive, angry, and obscene culture. But it's not necessary that all the trends continue as they have been, for a variety of reasons. One is, I don't think many people realize just how bad things are across the entire culture. That's one reason for writing this book and writing about so many aspects of the culture. You know, they read about an outrage in the paper and they say, isn't that awful? And a week later they read something else. But if they realize it's a culture-wide phenomenon and the decline is everywhere, and what the causes for it are, they may begin to resist it. Now, when I say resist it, I mean resist it in varieties. For example, not in a big national sense, but you know, on your local school board, or local public school, in your local church, which many churches have become politicized, to the left, in your faculty departments, and so forth. And maybe that kind of resistance by informed people will stop these trends. The other thing I think is possibly a hopeful sign are the signs of religious renewal in this country. Whether that will prove to be strong enough and last long enough to restore a better moral sense, I don't know, but the signs are there.
You say in your book that this is a secular country, and we've had people here that say this is the most religious country in the world. Which is it?
Secular.
What's your...
Well, yeah, people say they go to 42% of people say they go to church every week. It may be, but it doesn't seem to affect their behavior. Now, they seem to go to church to be soothed rather than to be given rules to live by. They don't. The rules aren't much offered because churches have become soft, trying to keep up with the culture. The culture's affecting the churches more than the churches are affecting the culture. But you can see, you know, for example, the abortion rate is higher among Catholics than it is among Protestants or Jews. I picked that because the church's opposition to abortion, absolute opposition, is well known, but apparently it is not affecting the behavior of the Catholic congregations. And I think similar examples could be drawn from Protestant churches and Jewish synagogues.